All right, excellent. Welcome, everybody. We're so excited for all of those who are joining us online and here in person at the Seed Lab in downtown Anchorage with some lovely meeting space. My name is Melissa Heuer. I'm with Spork Consulting, and we'll be talking about all sorts of rhodiola this morning. We have a pretty great lineup, I think, for the workshop. We are going to start with over here a little bit from Sundance Visser with the Alaska Food Policy Council. Then we'll turn it over to me, Melissa. I'll talk about the surveys that we just completed over the last couple of months. Everything good? Yeah. Great. Then Jenifer McBeath with UAF is going to talk about rhodiola research, disease concerns. Then Petra Illig is going to talk about Alaska rhodiola and kind of never-ending opportunities for market growth and potential here. Hanna Deacon with the Oregon Tilth is going to talk about the organic certification process. We'll have time after each speaker for questions and then additional questions at the end. So feel free to ask whatever you're most comfortable, both online and here in person. Feel free to just either speak up if you'd like to talk online, or you can type them into the chat as well. And yeah, I think with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Sundance, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Sundance, and I am joining you all from Homer, Alaska this morning. And I am just going to give a brief introduction to the Alaska Food Policy Council. That is where I work and who is hosting this project. So we are a nonprofit, a statewide nonprofit. Our goal is to create a healthier, more secure, and more self-reliant food system for Alaska. And here's one of our little graphics about a system, just showing all the different elements that are connected around food. And yeah, there's this and much more on our website. So like I said, this is just a brief little intro. Our mission is three-part. We connect, advocate, and inform. One of the ways we connect is through our conference that we host every 18 months. And this was the artwork from our last one in November of 2023. And we also host events like this one with different partners about different topics. So who are we? We have a governing board from members across the state, and we have five staff members. Leah is in the room with you all. And up here we do outreach and education. We do advocacy at the state level. Two of our staff members are on their way to DC right now. Can you still hear me? I got the internet is unstable.
We're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we also have a number of working groups and committees. We help author reports. We share out resources. And these are our different communications and working groups. We've got a sign up on our website if you're interested in joining. They typically have monthly meetings. It's a really cool way to connect with folks across the state involved in all aspects of our food system. And our biggest project currently is the Regional Food Business Center project. It's a USDA grant. We are part of the Islands and Remote Areas Regional Food Business Center, which includes partners in Hawaii, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, American Samoa. It's pretty remarkable that we have been put in this group that sounds so different, but we have a lot in common. We face similar challenges with infrastructure, climate change, high cost of shipping, imported food, things like that. So that's another project that AFPC is involved in right now. And you'll definitely be seeing more about that on our website and social media. Our team has grown over the past year, and we're getting more and more things going on. So if you'd like to connect with us, you can sign up for our newsletter, join a working group, follow us on social media, come to our next conference, which is March of 2025. So yeah, thank you. That's my contact info. I'll put the website and my email in the chat, so feel free to reach out. And with that, we'll move our topic over to Rhodiola.
Thank you, Sonia. So I'm going to switch our screen real quick. Okay, we'll put this out here. So, oops. Okay, and also before I jump in, I also forgot one more introduction, Leah Moss, who's been a very valuable team partner too, and is with Alaska Food Policy Council. And so I just want to also do a shout out. Apologies for not introducing you earlier. She's here in the room with us. I don't know if folks online can see her or not. So I just wanted to, I'll do a little bit more of an introduction. As I said, my name is Melissa Heuer with Spork Consulting. I have a small consulting business here in Anchorage working on food security, food systems, and climate change adaptation work. And I've been brought on by the Alaska Food Policy Council to work on this pretty short study about rhodiola in Alaska. And when we started, I think we were all kind of a little unsure about what the market was going to say, what people were interested in growing, if people knew what rhodiola was, what the opportunities were, and how people were growing, and if they were using certified organic, if they were doing organic practices, conventional practices, what was really happening. And so there was a lot of unknowns when we jumped in. And I think all of us have been really pleasantly surprised that there's been kind of overwhelming interest in rhodiola. And as I think we'll learn a little bit more, there's also some really great market potential, which is an exciting combination to have when there's interest and potential. So we did a study throughout the whole state, and we started with 2 surveys, and they were quick. I'm sure that many of you online, and I think you in person, did you? I don't know if you completed our survey, but many of the participants did complete. We had a really good turnout. We did 2 different ones looking at people who are currently growing, which I don't think there's very many people. So we were not surprised, we were happy with some participants. And that gave us a pretty good overview of the sampling of people who are growing rhodiola in the state. And we did a second survey with people who are potentially interested or might just be getting started growing rhodiola. And we had 20 participants. So I'm going to do just a quick overview of that information, of the outcomes of those surveys, and then we'll dive deeper into the speakers who actually have just really amazing knowledge and insight. So people who are interested in growing rhodiola really cover the whole state, from southeast all the way up to Fairbanks, and all the places in between, and a little bit outside of there too. So really broad coverage of the state. And there's a mix of experience with farming for people. So a little under half of folks who are interested in growing rhodiola have quite a bit of experience with farming in general, and other people would be brand new to farming in Alaska. And that could be farming from really small scale to hundreds of acres, probably not hundreds of acres in Alaska, but the range of scale was kind of all over the place of how much they're currently growing, and if they're just doing backyard gardening or more expansive farming of other kinds. The real question that we are also looking at was how people were growing. So you're going to hear from Hanna with Oregon Tilth, and talking about some of the options for organic growing. And that is a question that we were looking at. And I think it's a big consideration that people are thinking about. 95% of potential rhodiola growers are interested in learning about the certified organic options. 60% of people thought that it would potentially add value to their crops. And no one indicated that they plan to grow rhodiola conventionally, using conventional practices, which would be pesticides and other supplements considered non-organic to your growing practices. There were a couple of kind of themes of challenges that potential growers were facing. They included funding for getting started, funding for buying land, and then also finding appropriate land that they had that was conducive to them for growing this product. Knowing how to plans, or if it was how to clear it or how to get it ready for growing rhodiola, kind of the basics of how to get started was a big challenge that was identified, and really understanding how to cultivate the plant and then how to process it. Fortunately, we have an expert, and we'll be speaking a little bit later about that as well. So really basics, basic startup issues around people who were thinking about getting into rhodiola. People who are currently growing, again, we have a pretty big range. You know, we had 7 respondents, and we have 6 different locations of people who are growing. So one person was growing in 2. If you're looking at why numbers don't add up, they're growing in multiple places. But really a big spread of where folks are growing rhodiola throughout the state, and their experience with rhodiola. A couple folks are pretty new to the rhodiola growing experience. You know, they haven't been through a harvest yet, and others are kind of in the middle range. And then there's a few people who have gone through and they've actually completed the harvest and preparation of rhodiola. So a good range of people from the start to the end of how they're in their kind of rhodiola growing experience. Again, organic was a big question, and trying to decide if organic certification is beneficial to their personal experiences of growing rhodiola in Alaska. Of the people who responded, 85% were interested in learning about certified organic options. A little under half thought that organic certification would add value to their product. About 2/3 of people are growing using organic practices that are not certified, which means they can't put the certified organic label on, but they can still say that they're using those practices, though it's not certified. And about 1/4 of people are doing a mix of conventional and organic practices combined. They identified a number of challenges to growing or expanding their rhodiola production, including finding markets and understanding how to get their product to market. The growth rate of the plant, which we'll hear, I think, a bit more from Jenifer about. It's a long time from when you plant a seed to when you harvest a rhodiola. Understanding and dealing with weeds and pest control. Research about issues facing rhodiola and potential growing it in the state. And also just general desire to connect with other rhodiola growers in Alaska and have a little bit more of a network. I think there was a lot of response that it's everyone's kind of operating in their own little bubble, and they would like to be more connected to each other. Generally, what we have found though is that the rhodiola market is ready, and so there's a good mix of people who are working on expanding and growing and doing more with rhodiola and connecting that to a locally already available rhodiola buyer, at least one rhodiola buyer here in the state. There may be others that I don't know about, but maybe, and certainly around the world. So we'll hear more about that as the morning progresses. If you have any questions about the survey or want more information about this project, in addition to reaching out to Sundance, feel free to contact me. And we will be wrapping this project up in about 2 weeks. So just a quick little kind of intro study about rhodiola here in the state. Does anyone have any questions before we dive into our rhodiola experts?
Thank you very much for inviting me to meet with all of you. I'm very, very excited because I think in my professional life, on my professional judgment, I think rhodiola has the most potential for a major crop for Alaska. Mainly because that rhodiola is a cold climate crop. And it's naturally growing in the cold regions like Arctic or elevations, high altitudes. So, and then because it's a medicinal plant, it has a very, very high value. Yeah, rhodiola, there's a lot of different varieties, strands, or cultivars exist in the world, but in the West or in Alaska, and we use Rhodiola rosea. However, in China, China have been using rhodiola for centuries, and then they use granulata. So if we're going to be interested in the market in China, we should also produce rhodiola and granulata. But the thing is, right now we don't have seeds of rhodiola, so that's another issue. I just want to raise the point so you understand different country may use different products. However, in rosea right now, we mostly use extract. So that may not be that important, but that's for you guys to study, to think about it. And then right now, there's another issue with cultural practices. And then most of the farmers found mulching, use a tarp over their rows of rhodiola. And then mainly it's for water management, and it's good for weed control. But it's not necessarily to have mulching, and if you cultivate it in a certain way. So, and then one major question is whether we should fertilize the rhodiola or not. Lots of people think we should leave them naturally, growing naturally, like in the wild. However, I have seen those rhodiola, the big ones, but it will take 25 years to grow that size. If we're going to use it to grow it as crop, I think that I have seen signs that fertilization is very important. So fertilizer is important. And then another issue that I will focus on is the diseases. For many years, we have thought rhodiola is very safe and there's no diseases. And so therefore we can grow rhodiola as we please. And then we'll go on and, being hunky-dory and be happy with it. However, last year, we experienced a unique year. What I'm afraid is going to be more common because it's going to, usually we talk about global warming. So people think, oh, we'll be warmer, from now on and to the end of the day. But the thing is actually, people forgot there's also precipitation. So what we have seen last year is that surely we might have a warming through the whole year if you average it out, or give a total, that thermal time. But the thing is, however, there's a natural mediation from the precipitation. So actually last year in Heuer area, I think Sundance probably will attest to that. But the thing is, it's very cool, actually. So then it turned out to be an ideal weather for diseases to occur. So sure enough, we saw the diseases. And then I'll show you in a minute. And then, of course, then when you have a disease, then what are you going to do? And then, of course, there's different strategies. And then so here I would talk about chemical pesticide versus biological. Next, please. This is you can see there's a lot of different species or even strands, whatever. You can see there's quite differently morphologically. And right now we have no idea the secondary metabolites like a cylindroside or some of them may or may not produce rosea, the rosavan. So, but I just want to show you, be careful when you start growing rhodiola. And then actually this is one area of study we should do is that we have to know to select what will be the best, that the rhodiola species or strand that will produce the highest secondary metabolite, like a cylindroside or rosavan. Okay, this is the rhodiola growing in the previous one. That's okay. The one I show you, the tall one, and those are growing in China. So you can see they're quite different. And then this is the seeds. The one on the left was the seeds I brought back from China. And then the one on the right, the one with the more oval shaped leaves. That's a rosea. So you can see they're quite different. This is great. And this is this is my photo. I took it last year when we visited. Oh, that's okay. Just leave it. Yeah, that you see the mulching and tarp. And you can see that in this one too. Those photos are taken from the Flying Moose farm that's in Anchor Point. And so here I just want to show you the variations. Just on the farm, they thought it's all rosea, but actually, personally, I don't think they're all the same. I think there's variations. So what we need to do is eventually select them and find out which one produced the highest amount of secondary metabolites. Yeah, this is a product, that's mostly those are in China. So you can see the size of root balls. And then what they do is they dry it, and then they thinly slice it. And then usually in the Chinese, many times they just use it as part of herbal medicine. The one of the ingredients in the recipe are prescriptions. But nowadays in China, they're mostly trying to extract them, make them into a gel capsule, because it's easier to take, by the patients for their treatments. And so only in the very traditional methods, then they mix all different ingredients of the different from the different herb, and then they cook it, and then eventually drink the broth, and that's how they treat themselves. So those are the practice carried out by all practiced by the Tibetans and the Han tribe in China. And then they treat all kinds of diseases, including strokes, and and then also the most popular one is right now in modern days is high altitude illness. So when I was in China, they gave me some, because when I was visiting those old Rhodiola growing area in the high plateaus, it's like 12,000 feet above sea level. So they gave me the those Rhodiola capsules. So then I took them. But anyway, yeah, this is just to show you the harvest in Alaska. This is about taken last year too, in the fall. This picture is from the Flying Moose farm in Anchor Point by so the farmers show us, and then you can see at the different stages of the harvest, and you can see the size of the rhodiola, the rhizomes. And this is I would say this is very respectable. And so I hope all of you will able to achieve that kind of harvest. So I think the one he harvests now here is like 4 or 5 years old. So I think that's very, very workable as a crop. And you also notice that in this one, he did not use mulching, but then his rhodiola grow pretty, big size. This, I just want to show you the weather summary of, during the growing season last year. And then Homer area, I want to show you. Look at the minimum temperature is less than 50 degrees. See, the reason it's and then see the precipitation, almost half a month that, during the growing season are all raining. This is the precipitations of that when they have rains. And I did not take into consideration of the fog and the other, other precipitations. So, this is ideal weather for diseases to occur. So, yes, it's very, very rainy. And so if we have this kind of weather, present a very big challenge to us, because we can almost be sure that we will have diseases. And then if we don't control those diseases, and we will not have a crop. I can be honest with you. You will not have a crop. Therefore, you will not have an industry either. So I would say utmostly important at this point is to control of the diseases. And then without that, all the rest is a pipe dream. Yeah, last year we found 2 diseases. Before we have none. We have noticed, we haven't noticed it, but actually in retrospect, I think I have seen the disease B, but it was so minute. The symptoms are so inconspicuous, and then the lesions, the spots on the leaves are so small, so I overlooked them. However, last year, because the weather condition is very conducive for the disease to occur, so then suddenly they flare up, and then I realized the importance, the significance of it. We actually, in the early days, that March, that that I was called by Kalugan, Stasha, and then he told me that he's when he was checking on his rhodiola overwintered, and then that it's just a mush. He did not see it. He saw them in the fall, and then they're just turned slimy. And then of course he didn't call me at the time. I have no idea what happened, but I suspect, because the symptoms he described, I suspect it's some kind of bacteria in nature, but we don't really know. That's a mystery. However, last year, I saw it with my own eyes, the unknown disease B. We saw the large lesions, and then the defoliation, and then so that virtually there's no growth, or all the growth for that year in the leaf part was all. So anyway, so then right now I will be talking about the disease B, so I'm sure what we have found. So this is a symptom of a disease A, and then you can see the scar in the hole, its center, very clearly. And then on the slides on the left, you can still see the dead vine. That's from the leaf, from last year. So apparently, the leaf and the stems become slimy, and then they died. Most of them fall off, but some of them are still more or less attached. But you can see in the center, and then the brown, head. It looks like a stem. Actually, it's the healing. It's the stem that's scarred over. So, but then there's some new shoots are trying to grow out of it, but it's really not worthwhile to keep it. So anyway, so that's a total loss. When I saw the diseases, and I went back to my my slides, the slides I took when I was in China, and mainly I want to know whether those diseases are uniquely Alaskan. But then when I checked this this slides more carefully, and I found, bingo, they are in China as well. But the Chinese obviously they didn't know that. And so look, you can see that some of those plants are kind of brown, yellow, or kind of uneven. Those are all signs of rhodiola diseases. And I would say the significance of it is that once we know that the Chinese have diseases, we have to be very, very careful when we're trying to get any seeds from them, much less plant materials. However, I don't want to make you feel depressed, because we do have different techniques. We can clear, I wouldn't want to say purify, but rather we want to, get disease-free materials from the seeds if I ever get this variety that popular in China from them. But nonetheless, here's what I want to show you, the leaf spots that is a unknown disease B. And so this disease will be very, very damaging, not only because the spots will eventually cause the leaves to fall off, but also look at the flowers. The picture on the slides on the right. See, then that means that plant will not produce any seeds. So if we have this disease going rampant without control, without effective control, and then that's why I say there won't be any industry, because the leaf will become detached, and then so therefore no increase in biomass or secondary metabolites of in the rhizome, and then if you don't get any new seeds, then there's no future for the crop. So we collected samples, and then this is just one of them. I just want to show you how we did it. So we detached the stem, and then with those lesions, and then we cut off those lesions, surface sterilize them, and then we put them on a culture media. So then we grow the culture media. The one actually this is interesting slides. The one on the right, the culture, the isolates, they have little dark center, and that is the pathogen that we isolated and purified it. And then the colony on the left, the bigger one, that's the trichoderma. Actually, that's now the commercial, it's commercialized, and so the trademark is a plant helper. And this is a top view and then bottom view. You can see how they interact. But if you look at the bottom view, the one on the right-hand side, and you can see that actually this colony of pathogen is being gradually surrounded by the biological control, by the Trichoderma attenuatum. And then if you see from the left, you see that there's a front. So it's like instead of a round, because if naturally the colony should be perfectly round. But in this case, you can see the front of this pathogen, the front of the pathogen, and it's flattened out. So that means that actually there's an inhibition going on. So that means the Trichoderma attenuatum actually inhibits the growth and the development of this disease or this pathogen. So we now, even though we suspect the pathogen of the cause of the leaf spot on rhodiola is caused by a fungus named Alternaria alternata, but then we're still confirming it. But nonetheless, I'm here want to show you mainly just so you won't be so depressed, because I think nothing is worse than when you saw something with such great potential, but you cannot get it. So now I think we do have some thing in our arsenal that we could control the disease while we're studying what truly the pathogen. So then how do you control it? And then, so I mentioned earlier, chemical pesticide and biological control. Seems to right now, that's the only methods we had in our hand. So we could think about maybe possibly will be efficacious. However, the chemical control, usually people think immediately about chemical control because, it's used so often in the lower 48 and then some even in Alaska on some crops. And so, but I have to, I want to share with you my own observations. I do not think chemical pesticide has a good future in Alaska if we want to grow our crop, well, and then without polluting our environment. The reason is that they have a very long persistence in cold soils. And then based on the studies done by, some scientists, and then one example is that the milestone is a herbicide. And then the company, the manufacturers make announcement, or they publish that the degradation, the persistence of the milestone in the soil, and the half-life is 34 days. However, in Alaska, when the farmers in Delta didn't realize it, then they used milestone to control the weeds, and it turned out to be 3 years. And you can still see the effect, the impacts of I would say adverse impact of the milestone on plants, because see, potato is extremely sensitive to milestone. So then 3 years after the milestone, I was in Delta, and I still saw that the damage caused by the milestone on potatoes. And then Travlan, the 5 years, the Travlan was another herbicide that this work is done in the late 80s. And then the data show that 5 years afterwards, and then the Travlan, the impact is still there. So that's why I would not advise anyone to use chemical pesticide in Alaska, especially not herbicide. And so, and then another thing is that's chemical pesticide have a tendency to bioaccumulate in plant tissues. This is already confirmed in potatoes. So then now, if we're talking about rhodiola, the rhodiola is going to be ingested in some form by human. And then we definitely want to avoid the use of a chemical pesticide. So now, what leaves us then? What kind of strategy we have in control the diseases on rhodiola? And then that's leave only biologicals. And there's many biological products nowadays commercialized and then you're available from the lower 48. But the thing is, it doesn't work. None of them worked. None of the one from lower 48 worked, because when the farmers checked with the company, and they were told plainly that those biological control products will only start to function when the temperature reach 50 degrees Fahrenheit. As you recall, the photos, the summary of the weather I showed you earlier, for the whole season, the temperature did not reach 50 degrees in the lower, in the minimum. So that's why it doesn't work, those products in Alaska. So then what are we going to do then? Fortunately, from my lab, I started looking into this problem 37 years ago, now 38 now. And I realized the impacts of chemicals, the damage the adverse impacts of chemicals in human and the environment. So I realized there's also biological, that's a kind of one of the results from my another one of my study. And I realized in nature, in Alaska, there's some beneficial microorganisms in our environment. And so I started to focus on that. And I did isolation and then did all those works through the years. And so then this is a few of the, characters or traits of the Trichoderma atrorheti. First of all, Trichoderma atrorheti it's very, very resilient. And it has temperature range from less than 4 degrees to 33 degrees centigrade. If you want to use Fahrenheit, it's like a 39 degrees Fahrenheit and to 92 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the range, pretty much cover all the temperature requirement for the plants. for most of the plants, unless we talk about desert plants. But nonetheless, and for the pH, and it's 1.5 to 9.5. As you know, Alaska tend to have acid soils. So our soil naturally is 4.5. And then when you cultivate it for a while, it might reach 5.5, but the thing is still pretty acid. So, and then, so those are when the, for biologicals, they're very, very sensitive to their environment. So if they don't have the appropriate environment, they will not function. So then that's very advantageous for the Trichoderma atroviride because it's very, has a, high tolerance and very resilient. So another thing is to our advantage is Trichoderma atroviride has a very high hyperparasitic, capabilities. So through the years, I challenged them against all those pathogens and found out they're, very efficacious against most major pathogens. So anyway, so then in addition, there's we found the characters that they're biostimulants. So then the plants treated with a plant helper usually grow faster and stronger. And from one of the farmers' results indicate that when he treated the seedlings with a plant helper by dipping, and then in 3 months, the growth of the plant of those treated plants seedlings is equivalent to 2 years of plants. So this is in case you want to know more about the the plant helper, and I'm giving you the link. They have a Impact Biotech Net and the Impact Biotech Net.com. So anyway, so that's and thank you very much. That's my presentation, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Jenifer. You have so much information. We did get a question online that asked how many folks locally. Is there any wild rhodiola in Alaska?
Yes, actually, one of my assistants a few years ago went to took a trip in Denali Park, and she found rhodiola, in the wild. But the thing is, see, when we're doing commercial, we have, we have to be careful what kind of rhodiola we grow. So if the rhodiola, they can grow, in Alaska, but the thing is they produce very little, secondary metabolites, then they're no use to us. So right now, my graduate student, he is doing a thesis on testing the rhodiola, secondary metabolite of rhodiola in those samples. So we hope that we will be able to come up with a standardized process. And then in that case, we can use that methods and then start to do the screening and select the biomass or the germplasm we think that produce the highest content of the secondary metabolites. So that's something, we hope that will produce results soon.
With that, I'm going to pass it off to Petra Illig, and she will be talking about Alaska rhodiola and market opportunities here in Alaska.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. I think this is a wonderful opportunity, and I have to send my thanks to both your organization and the Alaska Food Policy Council, because you've basically shown how there are so many people interested in rhodiola, interested in becoming growers, and we really don't have a kind of a central agency yet to keep track of what's going on. So I really appreciate this opportunity. Just a brief introduction. I'm a medical physician and medical doctor in Anchorage. I'm not a naturopath. I have no background in herbal or holistic medicine. So I know a lot about rhodiola, but I don't know a lot about other herbal products. So just bear that in mind. I get a lot of questions about, can you mix this with ashwagandha and all of that? I don't know, that's not my area, but I became enamored with rhodiola about 15 years ago. I read an article in Science News about this interesting plant, its history, and its medicinal value, and that it was sort of used in the Soviet Union a lot. And knowing that, and the best rhodiola seems to come from Siberia area, and I thought, gee, I wonder if we can grow this in Alaska, and that was kind of the spark. Next slide, please. So just very briefly, as Jenifer mentioned, there are many rhodiola species, and actually the indigenous species here in Alaska seems to be Rhodiola integrifolia, which also has been used by native Alaskans, both in the interior and along the northwest coast primarily for its medicinal benefits, but they're different chemicals and different benefits. So Rhodiola rosea, the distinguishing feature is that it produces rosavins. Rosavins are a particular kind of secondary metabolite that distinguishes it from other rhodiola species. But it's basically a dicot. It's in the Crassulaceae family. It's a perennial. Depending on whether you're a lumper or a splitter, there's about 90 different species. And many of the older textbooks use older taxonomy names. So for example, I have a book here, a classic one from Anne Garibaldi, who wrote a beautiful treatise on medicinal plants of Alaska natives, and they call it sedum, sedum rosea subspecies integrifolia. So a lot of the old books have different taxonomy than is currently used. So now they call it rhodiola, and then the subspecies, Rhodiola integrifolia, Rhodiola cremulata, Rhodiola rosea. The reason it's called rosea is because when you cut the root, oftentimes you get kind of a rose-like odor. Its habitat is subarctic and alpine, and as Jenifer mentioned, it's morphologically plastic. You can have, you know, different appearances in a field from the same seed stock. Next slide, please. There are male and female plants, and people will tell me, how come I have red and orange plants, flowers, because they're supposed to be yellow. They both start as yellow flowers. When the male plant is done doing its thing, it just basically withers away. And when the female flower is pollinated and starts forming seed pods, it turns into an orangish red material, and then over time develops a dark brown seed pod. So they both start as yellow plants, and the seeds are tiny. They're very, very tiny. 1 gram will hold about 5,000 seeds. Next. So it is also, it goes by other names, golden root, rose root, Arctic root. As I mentioned before, it's a subarctic alpine plant. It has a long history of use in medicinal, traditional medicine in Russia, China, Scandinavia. It used to be considered a Viking warrior secret. The Soviets used it in their military. It was also considered a Soviet military secret for its ability to increase mental focus and counteract physical fatigue. So, but I just want to remind people that harvesting rhodiola is a destructive process. It's the root that's used, and so the plant is sacrificed. And because it's become so popular, it's especially increased in Western herbal medicine. It's being threatened to extinction. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the upcoming slides. So next slide, please. So in the wild, because its niche is to grow where other plants can't, it grows at high altitudes, brutal conditions, in soil cracks in between boulders, in gravelly, crappy soil. I mean, this is where it finds its niche. And it doesn't like growing where other plants grow. So in the wild, because of those harsh conditions, it can take decades to grow to a large enough size to be considered valuable. And that's why when most of the botanical industry until recently has been relying on wild harvest for their products. This plant has been threatened to extinction. And as a matter of fact, in December of 2022, it was placed on an international treaty called CITES, which stands for Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species. If a plant or animal is placed on that species, it's illegal to trade across international boundaries. So in Russia, for example, and in China, where most of the wild harvest was obtained from for botanical companies throughout the world, they can no longer obtain it from them. So cultivated rhodiola is the way to go. And if it's cultivated in slightly milder temperatures, like a June's Living Farm, and the weeds are managed, because remember, one of the rules where weeds can't grow, where other plants can't grow, you bring it down to farm fields where it has to compete with the dandelions and the grasses, it doesn't do very well. So weed control is really critical. Next slide, please. This is sort of a polar view of rhodiola range. Now this does combine various rhodiola species, and you can see rhodiola rosea is primarily from Russian Far East, a little bit south in the Caucasus, and then around into the Alpine area, because further south it needs to go up higher in elevation for similar climates. And then it comes around to Iceland and Greenland, and then in North America, all the way down to the northeastern seaboard of Canada, but then it stops. And the rhodiola that we have, as you can see on the bottom right-hand part of the slide, what we have here going from Alaska all the way down to the Rockies and the Sierra Nevadas is integrifolia, not rhodiola rosea, as far as we can tell. Next slide, please. So very briefly, the medicinal properties, primarily it has been used by indigenous northern peoples for its ability to improve mental focus and physical stamina. And it has had that capability throughout, folklore, because of its use primarily in athletes and warriors. And more modern uses also have to do with mental focus and physical stamina, frequently in athletes, but it's known to be a powerful adaptogen, and adaptogens are chemicals that don't have specific effects, like you take your medicine for it creates a biochemical pathway for a specific effect, like lower your blood pressure. These are more chemicals that help normalize and rebalance and support normal biochemical pathways in the body for stress response. And so in essence, it helps the body adapt to stress, and therefore it can have different effects to different people. Next slide, please. Oh, it's got no known toxicity. Very briefly, I'm just going to run through the history here of how we started, just so you all understand that this isn't suddenly sort of a flash in the pan. We've worked, myself and other crazy rhodiola people have worked here now for about 15 years to establish the fact that it can be grown. So first started out on my front porch in 2008, putting the seeds out. I received these seeds from Canada. They have an organization called ARGO, Alberta Rhodiola Rosea Growers Organization. And I befriended their agronomist, and he sent me a handful of seeds, gave me some basic instructions, and I went to town. And my neighbors were very, very worried, I could tell, because my yard, as you can see. Next slide. Then my problem was I had 100,000 seedlings. I didn't know what to do with them. So I elbowed my way into many different farmer meetings, and cajole various farmers to give it a try. And we had our first, and we developed a co-op to kind of share information and share resources and understanding. And so our first intrepid growers were in Delta, Draper Creek, and in the Matsu Valley, and also all the way to Bethel. Tim Myers in Bethel started, but I haven't worked with him in a few years. So then, next slide, please. Then we did visit with Steve Brown from the UAF Extension Service and a couple of other growers. We visited the Alberta group and saw how they were doing things, and they were several years ahead of us. But it was really interesting meeting. Excellent. And then we had our first harvest in 2013 and 2014, and we were very, very excited because now it's like, well, now what do we do, right? Next slide. We had to kind of collect a whole bunch of volunteers over at the UAF extension or UAF experimental farm, where they offered us a facility to bring some volunteers together, and we really basically figured out how to wash, slice, and dehydrate. Next slide, please. So then we were able to get a few more growers involved. These top three slides on the left, Anchor Point, that's Al Poindexter at Anchor Point Greenhouse. The middle one is Flying Moose Farm that Jenifer mentioned earlier. And then on the right, Anchor Point Greenhouse, we developed a root processing facility because we couldn't continue using the UAF experimental farm. And down on the left, that was one of the largest fruits I had seen. That happened to come from Mark Rappel Farms, who decided not to become a rhodiola grower because he couldn't wait 5 years for his first harvest. He needed to do things on an annual basis. But anyway, it was very, very rewarding to me to see farmers actually coming up with good harvests. I did also make a visit to Swedish Herbal Institute in Sweden. They are one of the major producers of high quality rhodiola products. And I was just overwhelmed when I walked into their warehouse and they had these bags and bags and bags of dry root, all from wild harvest in Siberia. Next slide, please. Also visited German rhodiola growers. They're doing cultivation in a big way. I wasn't able to actually visit any commercial farms. I think they felt this was a little bit too close to learning their secrets, because they say that they can get their plants ready for harvest in 3 to 3.5 years. And I think they just do a lot of preparatory work, maybe in greenhouses to get them going earlier. But it was very interesting to see that they're also doing this. Next slide, please. I just want to do a shout out to various university organizations that we've been working with and collaborating with. I could spend an hour on this slide going through all of the various organizations and universities and support, especially the USDA specialty crop grants that I've been doing about 4 different cultivation types of research projects in a row, finishing up one this year. And that reminds me, I never want to fill out another grant application again in my life. But these are very important research collaborations that I think the University of Alaska, both in Anchorage and Fairbanks, could really benefit from. I mean, just from what Jenifer mentioned at UAF, there are so many questions about rhodiola plant physiology, cultivation, pathology, fertilization, seed selection, all these things that could keep agriculture graduate students busy for decades. Next slide, please. So basically, right now, we've learned the basics. We learned that we can grow rhodiola in Alaska. It requires well-drained soil. It likes sandy soil. It needs sunshine. Remember, it grows above the tree line normally. You can't like grow it underneath your spruce trees. We need to understand fertilizer and pH control better. One of the mistakes we incorporated in our early designs was information from Alberta, which basically said, you don't need to fertilize, you need weed control. So a lot of our growers basically just tore up fields, planted it, and really came up with very small growth simply because Alberta has better soil than we do. And so one of the projects I'm finishing up this year is trying to look at various soil amendments. And it's really true that this plant, even though it doesn't mind living in really crappy conditions, we don't want little tiny crappy plants that take 20 years to grow. We want something big and juicy with high secondary metabolites so for an economic reason. So it does tolerate drought, but it doesn't grow very well. This plant is so robust and almost impossible to kill, but it does need, you know, some nurturing in order to grow to the size that we want for economic purposes. Again, 4 to 5 years in the fields is the minimum. Normally we start the seed from in the winter stratification, which is the typical traditional way. You plant the seeds out in moist soil in the middle of the winter, cover it up with snow, stick it outside and wait for things to thaw. And at that point, you'll start getting little babies that may take about a year to be big enough to put out in the fields. There are other ways of doing it too, but this is kind of the standard way. The important thing for an economic perspective is the root size. The bigger the root, you know, the more valuable that particular plant is per unit, and rosabin and salicroside concentration. So we test when we are interested in purchasing from a grower, we test pre-harvest to tell them, yeah, looks like your rosabins are, you know, high enough to be worth harvesting. And then of course we test after harvest prior to purchase. And we could spend another half hour talking about testing, but I'm just trying to move it on here. So root size, you know, if you've got a root that is just pulled out of the ground, as you notice in some of the other slides from Jenifer and some others I'm going to show you, it's a thick, internal, very fleshy rhizome with lots of convolutions in it. As a matter of fact, when you slice this thing in half, to me, it looks like a brain because it's got all of these folds in it, which makes it hard to clean. But you have to trim off all of the excess rootlets. Even though they do contain rosabins, they contain less rosabins in the rootlets than in the rhizome itself. So if you're using those to increase your mass, you're going to start diluting down your rosabin concentrations. And plus in our dicing and slicing equipment, it really, these rootlets and root hairs, they jam our slicers. So we, with a machete, slice off all the roots and of course the vegetative stalk. And then when you slice them up and put them in the dryer, in the dehydrator, it loses about 75 to 80% of its volume. So a 1 pound root would end up in a 1/4 pound dry material. Okay, and pros and cons of organic certification. I'm not even going to go into that because that's going to be further discussed. Next slide, please. Just very briefly, during I mentioned that we had a co-op. It didn't last very long. Kind of fell apart a little bit, and in part I think it's because Alaskans like doing things themselves, right? And people kind of like decided they would do their own thing versus having annual meetings and bringing together their combined knowledge. But during the time that we did have a co-op, we were able to keep track of what we produced. And these were, of course, tiny, tiny numbers. Our first grower, 166 pounds of dried root. I mean, we were thrilled, right? And over time, you can see it did increase. Just as of 2018, we had 4 growers, small plots, but we did have over 600 pounds of dried root. Next slide, please. Oh, on the bottom there, it's hard to see. So the wholesale price, and this is really important, the wholesale price back in 2013, we were thrilled to pay to be able to sell rhodiola to other organizations, other companies, basically range from $13 to $20 in 2013 and 2014. And in 2018, we were able to get $40 for a pound of dried root. And there's a lot of reasons behind that rise in price, and the price is continuing to rise. Go ahead and next slide, please. So currently, there's no longer a co-op, it was basically disbanded. And so I'm struggling, and I'm so grateful that you did the survey. I'd love to know who all those growers are, so I can call them up. But we weren't able to kind of keep track of everybody. So it was only those few growers that I knew personally that I could communicate with. But I estimate that since then, we probably are bringing in about 2,000 pounds of dry root a year. And so we have a few growers on the Kenai, maybe 5. There's a couple of in the Matsu Valley. One that is planning on an 80-acre farm at some point. She's taking her time to clear the land and prepare it. And there's another couple of the smaller growers. I get calls a lot from people who just want to grow for personal use, you know, and that's fine with me. But remember, it's going to be 5 years before we have our first count of Rhodiola tea. So, again, in order to be economically feasible, I think people need at least an acre, depending on how tightly you pack them, which is dependent on the equipment that you're using. I mean, if you're just using, you know, a handheld I was gonna say rototiller, versus the tractor, you could probably plant your rows a little bit closer together, but most people will tell you somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 plants an acre. Otherwise, you're probably not going to be able to make money. If it's too small, it'll be more for personal use. Plus, if you're going to be spending money on organic certification, whether it's a half-an-acre farm or a 5-acre farm, you know, the cost of organic certification is so high that it may not be reasonable for smaller farms. So that comes with economy of scale. What I always try to tell people is, see if you can dedicate 5 acres. So plant an acre a year, so that by the time the 5th year comes online, you can harvest that acre and replant that. So that's kind of, I would think, a minimum situation. Next slide, please. So what can a person earn? Every time I give this slide, I have to change the numbers because the price goes up and up and up. So remember, a 1 pound root will dry down to about a 0.2 or a 1/4 pound. And how big can your roots get? Well, if you're not really paying attention or not doing a really, good job in weed control, you're probably lucky to get a 1/2 pound or up to a pound, which is pretty common. But 2 to 3 pounds is attainable. It just requires good soil and good weed management, just. So let's say that at current price, 1 acre, let's say we're doing a low conservative estimate of 10,000 plants, that will bring you, depending on the size, if it's a 1/2 pound each, it'll probably get you 1,000 pounds of dry root. If it's a 1 pound on average root, it'll get you 2,000 pounds. And at the current price, you're going to be able to expect 60 on the low end to $120,000 on the high end of income, of value of that crop. Of course, everybody's situation is different. If you have, depending on what your capital investment is, right? I mean, if you already have a farm, you've got tractors, the equipment, then you don't have to, front end load that with capital. People will start like doing the math about, well, I could buy a farm and then I have to get a John Deere up here and blah, blah, blah. And then I'm not going to make money for 30 years. Well, that's farming, right? So some challenges here. There currently is no Rhodiola growers organization to keep track or provide information. I think this is really, really important. We tried the co-op method. That didn't work out more than 5 or 6 years. Maybe it should be something more. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with co-ops. I guess some people just think this is something, but But there's a value there, but it doesn't seem to work very well in Alaska. So maybe it should be more of some sort of trade organization, like the peanut growers. They have, you know, a collective group. But we need something to assist the farmers, to spread information, to provide data, right? And also, I think it's really important to know who's out there, and so we know how to help. 2 more minutes, almost there, thank you. We need to develop, like Jenifer mentioned, a quality seed stock. I mean, right now, we're using seeds that somebody sent me in the mail from Canada. I crossed my fingers that it was quality seed because it came from, you know, their science group. There's such variability, morphological variability. We really need to dedicate some time to an effort to developing a high quality seed stock that Alaskan farmers can use. We need a lot of investment in farm support and ag research. We need to improve our knowledge about best cultivation techniques, laboratory testing. Right now, I send everything to a chemist in Canada who has worked with the Alberta growers, so he knows rhodiola chemistry very well. But it would be nice to be able to do all that internally. Financial aspects, labor. I mean, the only farms that I think that are really relatively successful are those that have lots of kids. Right? I mean, are you going to be able to spend $15, $20 an hour on hired labor to go out there and pull weeds? I mean, these are big issues here. Right? And of course, organic certification issues, past climate change. Like I said, this is endless research opportunities for UAA, UAF, and APU. APU has also been involved in some of our activities. And for me, and I don't want to seem to be politically incorrect, but for goodness sake, UAF is a land grant university. We no longer have a department, the Department of Agriculture. It's disappeared about 10 years ago. Opportunities abound. So from my perspective, what I'm really interested in is threefold. Number one, I want to put money into the pocket of Alaskan farmers. So secondary thing here, we have some food insecurity, you know, in Alaska. And if we expect farmers to grow food just for the purpose of making money growing food, that's a really difficult thing to do. If we can offer them a crop that takes advantage of our environment and likes to grow here, and they make money growing rhodiola, maybe they'll grow more food on the side. So that's really my goal number one. Goal number two is I want to produce the highest quality cultivated rhodiola on the planet because there's a huge market opportunity here. Just last week, I got a call from a company and said, can we buy 2 tons of dry rhodiola root? I mean, this happens all the time because they can't get it anymore. And so to produce the highest quality and cultivated rhodiola on the planet would put us in the forefront of rhodiola markets. And then the last thing my last goal is to develop an internal, vertically integrated industry here based on our rhodiola. We make products currently. We are selling the tincture. Last year we did over $1 million worth of sales. About from our website on rhodiola tincture. We are currently building in locally here in Anchorage an extraction facility. We're investing about $1 million worth into putting in equipment and getting ready to do secondary extraction to get to what Jenifer pointed out, to a dry powdered extract. With the idea that this would be the seed for other products. Okay, so I know. So what we want to do is get money in Alaska and actually purchase rhodiola harvest from Alaskan farmers at the very highest price so that we can keep the money on Alaska. I think that's pretty good. really just another couple seconds. So, market research basically in 2022 is that the global sales of rhodiola supplements was over $14 billion. And we could definitely become a major global source of high quality rhodiola rosea for the world market, but that requires more growers. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so
I
much.
think my next slide just has contact information.
That's organic.
Oh, yeah, well, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, that one.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's so much information. We are a little over, but we can have time for 2 quick questions. Does anyone here have questions in person? I know we have a couple online.
What does the production in Alaska or in Alaska, Canada look like? How are they doing?
I'm not privy to that information. It's a little bit kind of kept to their chest. But they have been doing this since about 2005. And they have a lot of international buyers. They don't make a product themselves. They sell the dry fruit, and they have different categories of pricing depending on whether it's conventional grown or organic and the percentage of rosavins and psilocybins. But I would suspect that they do a few thousand pounds a year.
Yeah.
And then 2 questions from online. One is, are there any companion plants that grow well with rhodiola?
Well, we know that dandelions love growing with rhodiola, but rhodiola does not love growing with dandelions. There's some ideas that perhaps certain kinds of mosses might help promote growth, but this is an area of research, right?
And can you propagate rhodiola using the rhizomes themselves?
You can.
Yeah, so hi everyone. It's great to be here with you all today. My name is Hanna Deacon, and I'm the Organic Transition Specialist with Oregon Tilth. And with this new program called the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, which I'll dive into in a little minute here. So why I'm here today is because there is interest in organic certification with rhodiola in Alaska. And we do have some growers in Alaska who are currently certified organic. And as that survey showed, there are others that are interested in it. So today I was just going to give a really quick little brief overview of what organic certification is, how do you go through the process, and then I'll be happy to connect with anyone who has any further questions. And that's part of the work that I do, is just helping people move through the certification process. So don't hesitate to reach out, and I'll have my contact information on the screen at the end here. But if this is something that you're interested in pursuing, we are happy to help you through that process. So let's see here. First, I just wanted to give one slide here on why you might consider getting certified. And for rhodiola in particular, it sounds like Petra will be able to speak a little bit more to the particulars of the rhodiola market. But in like total US organic market, I mean, it's a huge market, and that's why most people do get certified, is to tap into that market, right? And get the premiums that you can receive for different products there. And so I think the US organic market is at about 70 billion now in 2024. It's really huge, and especially for the medicinal herb market. And particularly if you're looking to sell, I think, outside of Alaska, and looking to sell down to the lower 48, or to the Pacific Northwest, there's quite a few herb buyers I'm aware of. That's when certification might become really helpful, and you might be able to sell more of your product that way. I recognize that selling within Alaska, oftentimes that just, Alaskan grown label holds maybe a little bit more importance than organic certification does. But just US, across the nation, it is huge. It's continuing to grow, and there's certain opportunities there. So I'm going to dive into what does it look like to become certified organic, and how do you go through that process? So first, just a little bit of bigger picture. of, who oversees organic certification. So the National Organic Program, which is under USDA, they generally oversee organic certification. They're the ones who establish and enforce all organic regulations. USDA Organic is a, national certification, and it's all coming through from USDA. However, growers are not going to be working directly with the National Organic Program. They work directly with third-party accredited certifiers in order to actually get certified organic. So the certifiers are accredited through NOP, and the certifiers are the ones that go through the whole paperwork process with growers. They're the ones who issue the certificates. They can be nonprofits, they can be state agencies, all different kinds of agencies are out there that are accredited for organic certification. And then there's the certified organic growers, of course. So those are the ones who are, getting the certificate. And there's a couple of different categories under that I just wanted to mention. So there are the farmers and growers and ranchers, and we just generally call all those folks producers. And then there's also the processing and handling side of certification. And under both of those, there are different scopes that you can apply for with certification. So one is crops, and that's the most common one. If you're, just growing a plant like rhodiola, then you would just be applying for a crop scope. There's also wild crop, where you can be harvesting a plant from the wild. There's livestock scope, and then there's also the handling and processing scope. So a grower or producer can apply for all 4 scopes or just one of them, just depending on the activities that you're doing. And then I just wanted to talk about, what certifiers are available for the state of Alaska in particular. So we have Oregon Tilth, which is who I work with, and Oregon Tilth does currently certify actually all farms in Alaska. And there's a reason for that, and I'll talk about that. It has to do with fees. And then there are just 3 other certifiers that are currently working in the state: WSDA, QAI, and Where Food Comes From. They're all certifying processing and handling facilities like coffee roasters, Charlie's Produce, that kind of thing. This is not to say that other certifiers can't work in the state. Other certifiers have in the past. This is just 4 that are currently providing certification within the state. And so the reason that Oregon Tilth is currently certifying all farms in the state comes down to the cost of inspection primarily. And so when you're getting certified, and I'll talk more about this in a minute, but when you're getting certified, you need to go through an inspection every year. And there are no inspectors located in Alaska. They're all in the lower 48. And so if all farms in the state, or if a lot of the farms in the state are certified through the same certifier, then that means that certifier can send up one inspector, and that inspector can inspect multiple operations, say on a week-long trip that they're up there. They can inspect a few, and then those operations can help split that cost of inspections. So that's just the reason that, all growers, so far at least, have chosen to go with Oregon Tilth. And then a little bit more on the fees, because this is always a huge question. What are you going to need to pay for certification? And I am not able to give an exact number on that, because fees do vary certifier by certifier. They also vary depending on how much it's going to cost for you to get inspected and what kinds of activities that you're doing on your operation. I will speak a little bit to Oregon Tilth, though, since they are the primary certifier for Alaska. And so for Oregon Tilth, the first year that you apply for certification, there is just a base fee that you pay for. It's including a fee for the scopes that you're applying for, and then a new applicant fee. And that's considered like your certification fee. And then, as I was talking about, on top of that, there is an inspection fee. And this will be true for any certifier that you go with. You will need to pay for that separate from like your certification, just like paperwork review kind of fee. The inspection fee covers the inspector's time to travel to your operation. If they need to, stay in a hotel the night before, right? So an inspector traveling from the lower 48, that can get a little bit spendy, which is again why operations choose to go with the same certifier so that they can help split those costs. And it covers all the inspector's time while they're at your operation, doing their administrative work for the inspection, all of that. And then I'm just going to quickly breeze through here the steps to getting certified organic and what this process looks like a little bit more. So there's usually a transition time, or I shouldn't say usually, there's often a transition time for growers who have been using any kind of a synthetic pesticide or fertilizer or any kind of a treated seed, anything that is considered prohibited for organic. That's the word that we use, is prohibited. And that's pretty generally just all synthetic chemicals that might be used on a farm are considered prohibited materials. So if you have applied anything like that, then there will be a 3-year transition period from that date that you last applied that material to when you are eligible for certification. Now, if you have been following organic practices and you haven't applied anything that's considered prohibited in the last 3 years, and especially if you have documentation to show what you have applied to your farm in the last 3 years, then you very well may be eligible for certification right away. So this question of, what is allowed on an organic farm, since, organic certification is all based on the regulations. It's a very regulated certification, I will say. And so the big question, right, growers have is, what can I apply? Because if you apply something that is prohibited, it will set you back to a transition period again. And you may very well lose your certification if you apply something that is prohibited. So it is of the utmost importance that while you are transitioning and during certification, that you always make sure anything that you apply to your land, to your crops, is allowed for organic. And there's a few different ways to make sure of that. So one is, once you're working with a certifier, always send in any kind of material that you're going to use to your certifier before you use it. You want your certifier to give approval. Yes, you can use it in the way that you intend to. Now, while you're in that transition time, maybe you're not working with a certifier yet. That is something that the programs that I'm working with can offer. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute here. But that's something that we can do is, offer a review of a material for you and make sure that that is allowed before you're with a certifier. And then there's also these lists that list materials that are allowed and prohibited for organic. And the primary one that people use is OMRI, Organic Materials Review Institute. And it's a huge database of allowed and prohibited materials. And OMRI reviews materials to ensure they're allowed for organic and then puts their seal on them. And companies and products, they pay to have OMRI review their material. And if a product has that OMRI seal, then you can pretty much guarantee that it's allowed for organic. It's always a good idea still to send in that information to your certifier to let them know. But as long as it has that seal and it's in their database, you should be good to go. Okay, so on this journey to becoming certified organic, the biggest thing that you need to do is develop your organic system plan. It's also your application for certification. And you might hear that, there's a bit of paperwork to do with organic certification. And there is, honestly, in the first year of applying. You need to develop this plan, which is kind of like a contract with your certifier. It tells your certifier what kind of practices are you going to be using, how are you going to be following the organic regulations, and then your certifier reviews that plan and, essentially tells you, yes, you are following organic regulations and we can certify you. And so in the first year that you apply, it's a little bit of a lift to complete this plan. There are, multiple pages to it, but it's just the first year that you complete this paperwork. And then after that, every year that you remain certified, you just send in updates to your certifier. You don't ever need to complete a whole OSP, as it's called, again. So it's just a one-time deal, and it's something that we can help you with, and the program that I'm working for can help you with in developing that plan. The plan will have some different components to it. Every certifier's plan is formatted a little bit differently, but generally they have these same components to it. They'll be looking at your land history, you know, what seeds are you using, your soil fertility management plan, what are the materials that you're going to be applying to your land, record keeping systems, all of that. Okay, so then just to go through this process a little bit more succinctly here. So if you're thinking about organic certification, you would first select your certifier, you know, call up your certifier, get to know them a little bit, tell them you're interested in certification. You then would get the organic system plan paperwork from that certifier. You would fill that out to the best of your abilities. We can help you with that. And then you submit it to your certifier and you pay your initial certification fees at that time. And then the certifier goes through what's called an initial review. They look over that paperwork and make sure that it's at least initially compliant with organic regulations. And then as long as you pass the initial review, then the certifier will schedule an inspection with you, and that's when the inspector comes out to your land. They'll take a look at every field that you have, and they'll want to take a look at your records. And records are a huge thing for certification, and particularly for the inspection. Inspectors will need to look at all records from sale to seed. So they do what's called a traceback audit. Every time they do an inspection, they'll do this. And so they choose one product that you produce, and they'll need to see records that line up from sale to seed. And then the inspector creates a report based on what they saw, what they observed. They send that back to the certification staff, and the certifier, you know, reviews the report with the OSP, any other documents that have been sent along, and evaluate for compliance. And as long as you are compliant, then they'll issue you a certificate. And this process can take a few months, and particularly for, you know, growers up in Alaska, it can definitely take a good few months, just because of the all the coordination that needs to happen and getting an inspector up there. So, you know, you usually want to apply for certification, and they recommend that you start the process at least 6 months before you want that certificate in hand. Sometimes it can happen within 3 months, but again, with being up in Alaska, you know, it's better to start the process earlier than later. And then every year that you are certified, you go through an annual inspection. So an inspector will come up, look at your farm in person. You'll update your OSP every year, send in updates on any changes to land or crops, inputs that you're using, anything like that. And you'll pay fees every year. And then they'll issue you a new certificate every year. Okay, so that's just the really basics of the certification process. I'm really breezing through it here. And again, I'm going to delve into next the programs that I work for and how we can help you through this process. So you are considering certification and have questions about it, we're happy to have another call with you and go through this process more in depth. So I am working with the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, also known as TOP, T-O-P-P. It is a national program that is run through USDA, so it's funded through USDA and the National Organic Program. And our goal with this program is just to help folks who are transitioning to organic, looking to get certified, with primarily educational support in, you know, whatever ways that we can, really. We have a couple of cornerstone programs that I'll go into, but you know, our goal is just to help people through the certification process, help with adopting organic practices, whatever it might be that folks need help with. So one of our cornerstone programs is the mentorship program. And this is where we can connect growers who are looking to get certified or just interested in certification with an experienced certified organic mentor. So someone who's been certified organic for a few years can provide some expertise there. It is a paid opportunity for mentors, and we do have a couple of mentors available within the state of Alaska, and we would love to have some more people on board. So if you know a certified organic grower in the state, there's not too many, just a handful or so, but if you do know someone who would be interested in this opportunity, we'd be happy to have some more mentors on board. It is completely free for the growers who are looking to get certified. And we are offering this program region-wide. So I'm working across a 6-state region. It's called the Northwest region of this program. Alaska is just one state in that. And the mentorship program is region-wide. So if, say you're interested in some crop that there's no one who's certified organic in Alaska, but you're really wanting to learn about organic certification for it, we can connect you with someone in another state, excuse me, in the lower 48, like Washington or, another state that's somewhat close by. We do accept applications for this program on a rolling basis. You can apply at our website, which is organictransition.org. You can also just get in touch with me. And again, I'll have my contact information at the end here. And we'll get you set up in this program if you just get in touch with me too. And then the other cornerstone program that we can offer here is assistance with the certification process. And we're calling this technical assistance. So this is where we'll have you talk with a certification specialist from Oregon Tilth, so someone who works with certification on the day-to-day. They're super knowledgeable about the regulations, requirements, the whole process. It will be a virtual support, but we're happy to talk with you over the phone or meet through a video meeting and walk you through the process. We can help you with developing your OSP, preparing for an inspection, understanding the regulations, knowing what you need to do for a record keeping system, all of those kinds of things. And again, you would just get in touch with me in order to set that up, and then I'll schedule a time for you to talk to one of our certification specialists. Okay, well, I know I didn't have too long, so I just breezed right through this, it feels like. Happy to answer any questions, and here is my contact information if you'd like to save that. The email, topp@tilth.org, top@tilth.org, that will go directly to me. So if you want to email me, use that one. That's also my direct number up there. And then I will just mention our website. Again, it's organictransition.org. That's where the applications for the programs exist. And also tons of resources on organic certification. We now have a resource library that has like 200 plus resources, I think. There's also event calendar on there, which there's not, a ton of events happening around organic certification in Alaska necessarily, but there are across the country, and many of them are offered virtually. So if you're interested in, looking around at what even might be offered over in Maine or something like that, it could very well be a virtual event for you. Okay.
Thank you so much, Hanna. That was great. And I will attest that your webinars have been very helpful. So if people are looking for some of those I have found as a very useful resource as well. Okay. We will open up. Are there any questions for Hanna?
Yeah, I actually have one. Hanna, thank you very much. I'm really interested in the 3-year requirement. Being that rhodiola takes generally 5 years to grow from seed to harvest, I just want to verify that if a grower used conventional soil amendments to start their field, like when they first put the plants in the ground, and maybe for another year or so, pH control and chemical fertilizer, and then the last 3 years of the plant's life, not doing anything other than just hand weeding, that would meet the minimum criterion for organic certification. I just want to verify that because it sounds like it would.
I believe that would, yep. As long as you have 3 years prior to harvesting that crop, and needing it to be certified organic, then yes, that would meet the criteria.
I appreciate that. I've actually had a grower said, well, I can put in Roundup, right? The first year, just kill everything
Mm-hmm.
and then plant, put in chemical fertilizer, and then, you know, you're good 5 years later.
Yep.
Kind of scary, isn't it?
That is kind of scary.
Well, didn't Jenifer mention that it accumulates in cold?
Well, but the point is, the rules say, you know, you can't use anything for 3 years.
So your plant could still have pesticides in
But
it.
then you would be producing a plant that has.
But it could be certified organic. I just wanted to point that out, simply
Yeah.
because we're unique here in Alaska with our cold soils. And one more question, is plant helper allowed, the trichophytum or trichoderm actoral I forget how to say it, but plant
Yeah.
helper, is that on the list?
Yeah. The plant helper is certified by OMRI.
Okay,
Perfect.
Great.
Yep, then that means it should be allowed. Yep.
Perfect. We have a few minutes left. I'm gonna open it up for general questions for everyone. We still have Jenifer, Petra, and Hanna on. So if anyone has any questions generally, and I know we got cut off with our technical stuff about if you could plant rhizomes.
oh, yeah, so I don't know if that came through. Yes, you can do root propagation, but our initial findings are that it doesn't really, they'll grow, but kind of weakly, so something negative happens when you split that root. It just isn't a very vigorous growth, so until we understand that better, I wouldn't recommend that, you know, I would recommend coming from seed for now.
Great. Okay, do we have any questions for either online? I'm not seeing any more online. But if you have any, you can type them in, or your speakers everyone should have speaker access if you just like to ask a question.
Yeah,
I have a
Margaret, I saw you had a question and then you turned your camera on. Sorry, Noah, I cut you off.
Sure.
Margaret, do you want me to read your question or do you want to jump on? Margaret had asked in the beginning of Petra's talk if she had any literature about Alaskan indigenous use that she could recommend.
Oh, yes, Anne Garibaldi's book, what's the title of it, Carl, that larger book there, the yellow, that one, yeah, the title of it is, I think, Native Alaskan, thank you very much, Medicinal Flora of the Alaska Natives by Anne Garibaldi. It was written, published by Alaska Natural Heritage Program, University of Alaska, Anchorage, 1999. Very, very useful.
Hold up just in front of you, I think that, yeah, right there, a little bit, and I'll talk.
Okay, there's some other publications I have as well. I happened to find one that was translated from Russian by Yupik, Siberian Yupik, native foods and medicinal plants. So there's stuff out there. But again, just a reminder that Rhodiola rosea is, even though when this was published, they thought it was kind of maybe the same species as what grows here, but what we have here is integrifolia, and it has somewhat different medicinal properties than rosea.
Yeah. The testing for the rosavin, what is the process for that?
Well, I send a small amount of dried root that I powder up in a little coffee grinder, and there are labs that will do it all over the country. If I need it certified, for certification purposes, I use one of the labs in the United States, either Alchemist or Intratech. Costs about $350 a pop to get salicroside and rosavin analysis. But for my research, I use the chemist in Canada because he does it for about half price, because I don't need it certified. Yeah, we test for rosavins and salibriside concentrations because really, you want at least 1% rosavins to make it worthwhile. Anything below that, most buyers don't want because it's just not potent enough. And we also, when we purchase a harvest, in addition to rosavin and salibriside, when I'm ready to purchase, I also check for heavy metals, and yeast and molds, just to make sure it's clean, because sometimes you're surprised. Having said that, I might just throw one thing out here because it confuses people. Why extract? Why go through an extraction process versus just grinding up the dry root material, powdering it out, and putting it in capsules? You can certainly do that. But there's an industry standard that's evolved for a long time that basically says, I mean, it's not a requirement, it's not a law, it's just an industry standard, that if you want to manufacture a product like a capsule or tablet, in order to call it a rhodiola supplement, it should have at least 3% rosavins. The plant does not produce 3% rosavins. Okay, and so if you're just going to grind it up and pack it in there to have a 100 milligram capsule in a standardized 3% rosavin dose, you might have to have like 4 big horse pills to get the same amount milligrams of rosavins in it. So that's why you need to extract to concentrate. And there's a couple of different extractions. Tincture is an extract. Tincture is really wonderful because it takes out not just those compounds that are water soluble, like you would find in the tea. Tea is a hot water extract, but it misses out on all of those compounds that are not very water soluble, that require an organic solvent, ergo ethanol, right? And so we experimented over a few years to find that sweet spot of alcohol and water concentration that would pull out the most of the important ingredients and still have enough of the water soluble ingredients in there, which actually give it the color and the flavor. So we used to use vodka, which is a very traditional way of doing it, but we now use something that's closer to Everclear concentration, and it seems to get most of this stuff out. So tincture is nice, but a lot of people don't want alcohol. And tincture is kind of an inexact science, you know, it's sort of like hippie mix, put 6 bullets in your teeth and here you go. So the secondary extraction facility that we're developing is basically taking a liquid, highly concentrated tincture and distilling off at low temperatures the alcohol and the water, getting it down to a dry powdered extract from which we can create capsules, tablets, sports supplements, skincare, whatever, right? But that's a scary process right now because
Now, is the alcohol considered to be organic? Is that gonna?
well, so that's a whole different, I don't want to monopolize here.
Yeah, let me just jump in. No, I think you had a question earlier, if you still do.
Yeah.
And then we'll go back to some of these other questions too. I know we're also running tight on time, so we'll wrap up after a couple more questions. And then if people want to stay on, you're welcome to, or follow up with other questions as well. But no, I don't know if you still have a question.
Hi,
Sure,
Noah.
I appreciate that. Hi, everybody. Thanks for all the wonderful information. Yeah, I'm Jenifer's graduate student, who she mentioned briefly earlier, who's researching rhodiola as well. And I just had a question regarding, we've talked about all of the different varieties of rhodiola and how the chemical composition between them is very different and they have different medicinal benefits. I'm curious do we know that rosavin and salidroside or any of these other constituents are the ones responsible for the medicinal benefits, or are those just more like the indicators that it's Rhodiola rosea? And I'm curious if any of you are aware of any researchers out there who are looking into the actual like biological pathways of how these bioactive ingredients actually impact the body and which ones, are responsible for the medicinal benefit.
Answer that. I am. Good to see you, Noah. The question is, who knows, right? Rosavins and many root herbs will produce salidroside. And we know salidroside is an adaptogen. It appears that Rhodiola rosea is the only one that also produces the rhodiola. So those are marker ingredients. How do you know that this is Rhodiola rosea? Well, it has rosavins. That makes it unique. But when you grind up a plant material, there are hundreds, if not thousands of chemicals. And how they work together is unknown. And I think, you can produce rosavins in the lab. It's not hard. It's a phenol with a bunch of sugar molecules on it. But if you just took a bunch of teaspoons of rosavins every day, would that do the same thing as whatever this plant does? This plant has evolved over, probably millions of years to be able to survive a really harsh environment. And those are the ingredients that we use in our bodies to hopefully help us counteract stress. But nobody knows the combination. It's kind of a heuristic sort of thing. And actually, sidebar here, I worry a little bit about if we cultivate rhodiola and nurture it, right? Take all of the weeds out, give it the best soils, love it to death, play Mozart, whatever, to get nice big plants. Is that producing less biologically meaningful potency? Because now the plant doesn't have to do so much work. So we just don't know what ingredients and what combination of ingredients are actually effective in human biology. So that's just not known.
Jenifer, it sounds like you need another huge handful of grad students to come up with, I think, 10 thesis ideas here. So
Actually, lots of work have been done by the Chinese. So there's tons of literature, of course, published in Chinese. And then, so they were able to test different kind of cylindricide, mainly because they don't have a rosavin. So that's, so that's part. I think that's coming from the European literatures. I think that because the reason we say we don't know because we don't have a tool. If we have a good tool, then we will be able to gradually tease them apart. I think that's what Noah has been doing because he's trying to figure out what is the best way to extract those secondary metabolites and then eventually standardize. I think, Petra also mentioned it. Standardization is very, very, very useful because then we all talk from the same language, same page. So once we have that, then we can start to test the production of the secondary metabolites, not only just rosavin, but also cylindricide altogether. And then we can test them, and then we can see which is the best. We can start to do our selections. And then we can also decide on the harvesting and then when will the plant truly be mature? Because right now we're just guessing. We said, well, 4 or 5 years, but then, however, if the situation is not perfect, it might take 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years, because that's what happened in nature. So so we don't really know, and if we have the standardized methods, then we can say under what kind of stress we impose on the plants and will force them to produce more cylindricide or other secondary metabolites. So I think all those, I usually, sometimes I talk to, Noah, he has the key in his hand. So then once he had that standardized methods, completed, then we can start to go ahead and do our selections in the, and then hopefully we can find the answers that Petra and many others wants to know.
Thank you. Now we have time for one last question. The question is from online. It says, did you say you are building a processing plant, and what form would you buy from the farmer, root or dry?
Oh, okay, so, well, we have built a processing facility at Anchor Point Greenhouse. So if a farmer doesn't have the capability of processing their own roots, we will accept them, just dug up, preferably cleaned. Because we have to charge for the farmer for the labor required to clean those roots and dry them. But we have a processing facility at Anchor Point Greenhouse. There is one critical piece of information here, though. It is important, once those roots are pulled out of the ground, remember, the roots won't die. I've had roots sit around for a year, like in a box, and replanted and it'll grow. Actually, this little guy, but they quickly degrade Rosavins' livericides. I did a study a few years ago where I took random roots that I had just freshly harvested. Half of those I dehydrated right away within 24 hours. The others I just let sit outside on my porch for 2 weeks. They were still very, very vigorous, but within 2 weeks, they'd lost half of their Rosavins because these roots are now stressed, right? You rip them out of the ground and they're consuming their Rosavins to survive. So it's important to keep them chilled. And we found that refrigerator temperatures stops that Rosavin auto degradation. So we always recommend, if it's going to take you several days or a couple of weeks to get your harvest finished and off to a processing facility, keep them in some sort of refrigeration unit. One of our growers, he does his own though. He purchased his directly, completely dried and bagged. So everybody's a little different. Was that?
I think that was the question, yes. So with that, we are over on our time. Thank you all for coming, for joining us in person and online. There were some great questions. I know there's more, and I also know that all of the speakers have a lot more information. So we are planning to include their contact information when we send out the recording of this webinar. And also you can reach out directly to Sundance and the policy counselor, Leah, or myself, and we can connect you as well with any questions, the right contact that you have. So thank you to our speakers. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll ask the policy council for heading this, and for all of you for coming out. And I hope you have a great day.